A humble blind woman mistook the arrogant millionaire for her online boyfriend who ran away. And what he did changed her life forever. Before the story begins, leave in the comments which city you are watching from, and at the end, do not forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Good story to everyone. Lila Evans ran her finger across her phone screen for the 10th time in 15 minutes. Nothing. No message. No call. No sign of life from Kyle. She was sitting on the edge of the Washington Square Park fountain, feeling the cool New York night breeze brush against her face. The sound of the water falling behind her was comforting, but not enough to calm the nerves twisting inside her. "He's coming," she murmured to herself, adjusting the bouquet of daisies on her lap. "He's just late, traffic, or the subway, or something." But it had already been an hour sitting there, waiting. An hour listening to laughing couples, kids shouting, skateboarders making noise nearby. An hour feeling the world move around her while Kyle simply didn't show up. Lila gripped the bouquet tighter, feeling the petals crush between her fingers. "Fool," she whispered, her voice trembling, because she knew. Deep down, she had always known. Kyle was never going to show up. 3 months of talking, 3 months of promises, 3 months of "we'll meet soon, I promise." And now, nothing. She blinked fast, trying to hold back the tears burning in her eyes. She wasn't going to cry there. She wouldn't give the universe that satisfaction. But then, one tear fell. And another. And before she could stop herself, Lila was quietly crying, sitting at the edge of that fountain, holding a bouquet for a man who didn't even bother to send a message. Across town, Alexander Hayes cut into his beef Wellington with surgical precision, while his fiancée, Camille Hart, went on about the wedding's floral arrangements. "I was thinking white roses and blue hydrangeas for the main tables," Camille said, gesturing with her wineglass. But Margot suggested pink peonies. "What do you think, Alexander?" He chewed slowly, keeping his face neutral. "Whatever you want." Camille narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean, whatever?" "It's our wedding, darling. You need to be more involved." Alexander took a sip of water, avoiding her gaze. "They're flowers, Camille. Any kind will do." She took a deep breath, clearly annoyed, but forced an elegant smile, the kind she had perfected after years of corporate events and charity dinners. "You've been so distant lately. Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine," he answered automatically. But it wasn't. Nothing was fine. Alexander Hayes, CEO of a tech company worth billions, sat in one of Manhattan's most expensive restaurants beside a beautiful, sophisticated woman who fit perfectly into the role of executive's wife. And he had never felt so suffocated in his life. Camille kept talking about the wedding, something about the guest list and cocktail menu, but Alexander stopped listening. His eyes wandered through the restaurant. Rich people in fancy clothes, eating expensive food, pretending any of it truly mattered. He loosened his tie, feeling the knot tighten around his neck. "Excuse me," he said suddenly, standing up. Camille froze mid-sentence. "Where are you going?" "Restroom." He didn't wait for an answer. Alexander walked quickly through the restaurant, past the restroom, and headed straight for the exit. The cold night air hit his face as soon as he pushed the door open, and for the first time in hours, he could breathe. Without thinking much, he started walking, and kept walking, until his feet brought him to Washington Square Park. Alexander stopped in front of the glowing fountain, watching the water dance under the lights. A few coins shimmered at the bottom. Wishes from people naive enough to believe tossing 25 cents into a fountain could change anything. He slipped his hands into his suit pockets and sighed. That's when he heard the crying, soft, muffled, but unmistakably real. He turned his head and saw a young woman sitting at the edge of the fountain, her face lowered, shoulders trembling slightly. She was holding a bouquet of flowers, as if it were the last thing she owned in the world. Wavy brown hair framed her shoulders, a simple blue coat, a white cane resting beside her. Alexander hesitated. He wasn't the kind of man who got involved. He wasn't the kind who asked, "Are you okay?" to strangers crying in parks. In fact, he was exactly the kind of man who pretended not to notice and kept walking. But something made him stop. Maybe it was the way she held the flowers, or maybe it was the fact that he was just too tired of pretending. Before he could decide, the young woman lifted her face toward him and smiled. A smile wet with tears, but still a smile. "Kyle?" she called, her voice trembling. Alexander blinked. What? You came. Lila stood up quickly, almost tripping on her cane. I thought you weren't coming anymore. She took a few shaky steps toward him, and Alexander froze. I think you're mistaking. No, I heard your footsteps, Lila interrupted, laughing nervously as she wiped her tears with the back of her hand. You walk slowly, with firm steps, like you're thinking too much, just like you told me in that message. Alexander opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Lila took another step closer, now right in front of him, and reached out until her hand touched his arm. Sorry for crying. I swear I'm not this dramatic. It's just, I got so scared. Scared that you'd changed your mind. Scared that you didn't want to meet me anymore. She gave a fragile laugh, full of uncertainty. Because, I'd understand. I know I'm complicated. I know I'm different because I'm blind. I know I'm not exactly the kind of girl people choose when they have easier options. Alexander stood there, frozen, while she spoke. He should have corrected her. He should have told her the truth. But before he could say a word, Lila let go of the cane. It fell softly to the ground, and raised her hands toward his face. May I? She asked gently. Alexander didn't answer. She took his silence as permission. Her fingers touched his face with a tenderness he had never felt before. She traced the line of his jaw, brushed his nose, and lightly ran her fingers over his eyebrows. You have a serious face, she murmured, almost to herself. But kind. I imagined you'd look like this. Then she smiled, a radiant, relieved, completely genuine smile. I'm so happy you came, Kyle. Alexander stood still, feeling the warmth of her touch linger on his skin. He should have told her the truth right then. He should have explained the mistake. He should have said, You're mistaken. I'm not Kyle. I don't even know who you are. But he said nothing. Because for the first time in years, Alexander Hayes had no idea what to do. Lila stepped back, bent to pick up her cane, and then held out the bouquet of daisies to him. These are for you. I know it's kind of silly to give flowers to a man, but I wanted you to know I was thinking about you the whole time. She laughed, a light and musical sound. Daisies. Nothing fancy, right? But I think they fit us. Alexander looked at the crushed flowers, then at her. Lila Evans was smiling as if the whole world had finally fallen into place. As if this moment was exactly what she had been waiting for all these months. And Alexander, the man engaged to Camille Hart, the man who always had total control, who never hesitated, who never let emotions interfere with his decisions, took the flowers. Thank you, he said, and his own voice sounded strange. Lila let out a deep sigh of relief, like she'd been holding her breath for hours. I knew you'd come. Deep down, I knew. She slid her hand down his arm until she gently held his elbow. Shall we walk a little? I don't want to leave yet. I waited so long for this, for you. And Alexander, against all logic, against all reason, against everything he was, started walking beside her. Because at that moment, holding a bunch of crushed daisies and letting a complete stranger cling to his arm as if he were the most important person in the world, Alexander Hayes realized his life had just turned upside down. Alexander Hayes had faced board meetings with angry investors, multi-million-dollar negotiations, and once even delivered a quarterly report with a fever of 102 degrees. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for Lila Evans talking non-stop for 5 whole minutes. And then I thought, does he prefer coffee or tea? Because I remember you mentioned you like green tea, but I also read that green tea can be really bitter if you let it steep too long. So maybe coffee is safer. But then coffee can make people anxious, and you already sound kind of nervous. So? She kept talking as they walked through the park, her hand still holding his arm with a confidence that made Alexander's stomach twist. He tried to interrupt 3 times. Leela, I need to. Oh, you can call me Lee. My mom calls me that. Well, she also calls me stubborn girl when I'm being difficult, but Lee sounds sweeter, right? Lee, listen. I think there's been a misunderstanding? I know I took too long to answer your last message. Sorry, my screen reader froze and I spent like 15 minutes yelling at my phone before realizing it had turned off by itself. Technology, right? Alexander closed his mouth. She laughed. A light, genuine laugh that somehow made the tightness in his chest worse. You're really quiet, huh? In your messages you seemed more, talkative. But that's okay. I like quiet people. My mom says I talk enough for both of us anyway. They stopped at a street corner, and Alexander finally managed to organize his thoughts. He took a deep breath, ready to tell her the truth once and for all. Lila, Lee, I'm not. Kyle, she finished, smiling. I know. You're Kyle. Kyle Mitchell, 26 years old. You work for a graphic design company in Williamsburg. Your dog's name is Bento. You're allergic to peanuts, and your favorite color is blue. I remember everything. The silence that followed was so heavy it felt like it might crush him. She tilted her head toward him. Are you okay? Yes, he lied, because apparently that's what he did now, lied to a complete stranger who had mistaken him for someone else. You seem tense, Lila said, gently squeezing his arm, like really tense. Your muscles are as hard as a rock. Do you work out too much, or are you nervous? Alexander blinked. Nervous? Ah, she let out a triumphant laugh. I knew it. You're nervous because this is our first real date, right? Look, I'm nervous too. My heart's beating like a drum. Want to feel? Before he could respond, she took his hand and placed it over her heart. And yes, it was racing. See? She said, smiling. We're in the same boat. Alexander quickly pulled his hand back, as if he'd touched something too hot. Sorry, Lila said, her smile faltering a little. I know I can be a bit invasive sometimes. My mom says I don't really understand personal space. It's just that, well, when you can't see people, you have to touch to get to know them, you know? But I get it if you think it's weird. It's not weird, Alexander said before he could stop himself. And surprisingly, it wasn't. Lila smiled again, and this time it was like the sun came out from behind the clouds. That's good, because I really liked your face. You have an interesting nose, like, too straight, almost aristocratic. Are you from a rich family or something? Alexander choked. Kind of. Liar, she said, laughing. You probably live in a tiny apartment in Williamsburg filled with plants you forget to water. I bet there's a dead succulent on your kitchen window. If only she knew he lived in a $4 million penthouse in Tribeca. Something like that, he murmured. They kept walking until they reached the bus stop. Lila stopped and turned toward him. So, this was the best first date of my life, she said, and the sincerity in her voice hit Alexander like a punch to the stomach. It was? It was. You showed up, Kyle. You actually showed up. I was starting to think you'd never really want to meet me, you know? That you'd just keep things online forever because I'm blind and that scares people. Lila, but you came, she went on, her voice softer now. And you didn't run away when I touched your face, and you accepted the flowers even though you thought it was silly. And you walked with me, even when I talked non-stop for 20 minutes about green tea. Alexander stayed silent, because everything he wanted to say was stuck in his throat. So thank you, Lila said, stepping forward and rising on her toes. Then she kissed him. It was quick, light, almost shy, just a soft brush of lips that lasted less than 3 seconds. But it was enough to make Alexander's entire world stop. When she pulled back, she was blushing. Sorry, I know that was too bold for a first date, but I had to do it before I lost the courage. Alexander couldn't speak. He couldn't think. He couldn't do anything but stand there, frozen, still feeling the ghost of that kiss on his lips. The bus stopped with a hiss of brakes, and Lila turned toward the sound. That's mine, she said, adjusting her cane. Text me when you get home, okay? Wait, Alexander finally managed to say, his voice coming out more urgent than he intended. She paused and turned her face toward him. Yes? My phone, he said quickly, improvising. I dropped it before coming here. The screen shattered completely. It won't even turn on. Lila frowned. Really? But didn't you text me saying you were on your way? Alexander's heart started pounding. I did, from my computer, before I left home. Lie after lie after lie. Oh, Lila said, seeming to accept the explanation. What bad luck, huh? So now what? You could. Alexander hesitated, feeling ridiculous. You could give me your number again, just so I have it when I fix my phone. Lila smiled. Of course. Type it in. Alexander pulled out his phone, the perfectly fine, very expensive phone with absolutely nothing wrong with it, and typed in the number. Done, he said. Great. Lila adjusted her cane and took a step toward the bus. Oh, and Kyle? Yes? Next time, tell me if something goes wrong, okay? We can reschedule or something. You don't need to show up broken just to impress me. The bus driver honked impatiently. I've got to go. Lila waved and climbed the steps quickly. Alexander stood there, frozen at the bus stop, holding a crushed bouquet of daisies in one hand and his phone in the other. The phone that now had the number of a girl who thought he was someone else. His phone vibrated. It was Camille. "Where are you? I've been waiting at the restaurant for half an hour." Alexander looked at the flowers in his hand, then at the bus driving away, taking Lila with it. And for the first time in 10 years, Alexander Hayes simply ignored a message from his fiancée. Alexander Hayes spent 3 days staring at Lila Evans's phone number as if it were an unsolvable equation. 3 days ignoring Camille's increasingly angry calls. 3 days wondering if he had completely lost his mind. On the morning of the 4th day, he finally typed a message. "Hi, Lee. Phone's fixed. Coffee tomorrow?" The reply came in less than 2 minutes. "Finally, I thought you gave up on me. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. at Café Arabella in Greenwich Village?" Alexander stared at the screen, his heart beating faster than it should. "Perfect. See you there." Lila arrived at Café Arabella 15 minutes early, a personal record considering she usually got lost at least twice before reaching any new place. She sat at a table near the window and waited for the waiter to approach. "Good morning. What can I get you?" "Just a coffee for now," Lila said, smiling. "I'm waiting for someone." "Boyfriend?" "Possible boyfriend," she corrected. "We're still in that will he show up or will I sit here looking silly again stage." The waiter laughed. "Does he seem trustworthy?" "No idea," Lila said, adjusting her sunglasses. "I'm blind. For all I know, he could look terrified and I'd never find out." There was a short silence. "Sorry," the waiter said quickly. "I didn't mean—" "Relax," Lila laughed. "I'm joking, but seriously, he has a normal voice and hands that are way too soft for someone who works with them all day, so I'm guessing he won't disappoint me." The waiter chuckled and went to get her coffee. Lila sat alone for exactly 7 minutes before she heard the footsteps. Steady, hesitant, thoughtful, she smiled. "Kyle?" "Hi," Alexander said, his voice sounding strange even to himself. "You're late," Lila teased. 3 minutes and 40 seconds. "You counted?" "I have a talking watch." "Amazing technology." She gestured toward the chair across from her. "Sit. You're standing there like a statue." Alexander sat down, placing his hands on the table and trying not to look as uncomfortable as he felt. The waiter appeared immediately. "What can I get for you?" "Coffee. Black," Alexander said. "Wow, bold choice," Lila commented as soon as the waiter left. "Black coffee. No sugar, no milk, nothing. Are you one of those guys who pretends to like bitter coffee just to seem tough?" Alexander blinked. "I actually like black coffee." "Liar. How do you know?" "Because you hesitated," Lila said, smiling, like a whole second before answering. "People who really like black coffee don't hesitate. They say it proudly, like vegans." Alexander couldn't help but laugh quietly. "Fine, I prefer it with sugar." "I knew it," Lila clapped her hands. "Waiter," she shouted in the wrong direction. "Bring some sugar for my boyfriend in denial here." "I'm not your boyfriend," she finished, tilting her head. "Not yet, but we did kiss on our first date, so technically we're in an interesting gray area." The waiter came back with the coffee and a small bowl of sugar, setting everything down with an amused smile. Alexander stirred his coffee in silence, trying to organize his thoughts. "You're really quiet again?" Lila noted. "Is it shyness, or are you planning how to escape without me noticing?" "Neither. So you're just naturally mysterious and hard to read?" "Something like that." Lila laughed, and the sound filled the whole cafe. "All right, Mr. Mystery. Let me ask you something then. Why did it take you 4 days to text me?" Alexander almost choked on his coffee. The phone was broken, I know," she interrupted. "But you could have fixed it faster, right? Or sent a message from your computer again, or called from a payphone, if those still existed." She was right, and he had no answer. "Sorry," he finally said. "No need to apologize," Lila replied, stirring her coffee. "I just got worried that you'd changed your mind. Like maybe you met me." She paused and laughed. "Well, not literally met, but you know what I mean, and decided it wasn't worth it." "Why would you think that?" Lila shrugged. "Because that's how it usually goes. People get excited about the idea of meeting someone different, the interesting blind girl. But then they realize it's work. They have to describe things. They have to be patient. The world's easier for people who can see." There was something in her voice, a small sadness hidden beneath her humor, that made Alexander's chest tighten. "I don't think it's work," he said. "Really? Really?" Lila smiled, but it was a different kind of smile, softer, truer. "Thank you for saying that." They sat in silence for a moment, sipping their coffee. "Can I ask you something weird?" Lila asked suddenly. "Sure. You're breathing in faster than you were on our first date. Why?" Alexander froze. How do you know that?" "I hear things," she explained. "Like everything. People's breathing, how they move their feet when they're nervous, the sound clothes make when someone crosses their arms. You're breathing kind of fast, nervous, like in the park, but different." "Different how?" "In the park you sounded surprised. Now you sound guilty?" Alexander's heart started pounding. "Tell her the truth. Now. Now." "Lee, I need to tell you something." She tilted her head, waiting. I'm not." Then Lila's phone rang. She grimaced. "Sorry, it's my mom. She calls like 20 times a day to make sure I haven't fallen into a manhole." She answered. "Hi, Mom. I'm fine." "No, I didn't fall into any manholes. Yes, I'm at a cafe with Kyle." Alexander watched her face light up as she spoke. "Okay, I'll call you later. Yes, I promise to eat something. I know coffee isn't food. Bye, Mom. Love you too." She hung up and turned toward Alexander. "Sorry. Overprotective, Mom. Where were we?" "I was about to tell you." "That you're not what?" she asked, curious. Alexander looked at her, at that smile, at that hope, and swallowed the words back down. "Not very good at dating. Sorry if I'm being weird." Lila laughed. "You're not weird, Kyle. You're perfect in your own confusing, complicated way." And in that moment, with the morning light streaming through the window and Lila smiling as if he were the best thing that had ever happened to her, Alexander Hayes knew he was completely lost. Alexander Hayes stood in front of a 3-story building in Brooklyn, staring at the faded door marked 247, wondering what on earth he was doing there. He had offered Lila a ride after coffee. She'd accepted. And now he was about to meet her mother. The doorbell rang 3 times before it opened, revealing a woman in her 50s with the same brown hair as Lila and kind but tired eyes. "Mom," Lila called from beside him. "This is Kyle." Dorothy Evans studied him carefully. Not in a hostile way, but cautiously, the way any mother would. "Kyle," she repeated, her tone curious. "Nice to meet you, Dorothy Evans." "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Evans," Alexander said, offering his hand. She shook it firmly. "So you're the Kyle who disappeared for 4 days," Dorothy said, though there was a small smile on her lips. "Mom," Lila protested, blushing. "His phone broke." All right," Dorothy said, raising her hands in surrender. "Just looking out for my girl. You know how it is, Kyle. People aren't always who they say they are online." Alexander's stomach twisted. I completely understand, Mrs. Evans." Dorothy studied him for another moment, then her expression softened. "You seem like a good man, and my daughter hasn't stopped talking about you since you two met." She smiled at Lila. "So, what are you two up to today?" "Actually," Alexander said, "I came to invite Lila for a walk tomorrow, at Prospect Park. If that's all right with you, of course." Dorothy crossed her arms, thinking, "Prospect Park, that's far. I'll take her there and bring her back safely, I promise, and we can stay in touch the whole time." Lila was practically bouncing beside him. "Please, Mom, it's going to be so much fun." Dorothy looked at her daughter, then at Alexander, and sighed with a small smile. "All right, but you pick her up at 10 in the morning and bring her back before 6. And Lila, keep your phone on at all times." "Thank you." Lila hugged her mother tightly. "You're the best." Dorothy looked at Alexander seriously, though there was warmth in her eyes. "Take good care of her, Kyle. She's all I have." "Yes, ma'am, I will." The next morning, Alexander showed up exactly at 10, as nervous as a teenager on his first date. Lila came down excited, wearing a light blue dress and holding her white cane. "Ready?" he asked. "More than ready," she answered, smiling. The drive to Prospect Park was filled with Lila talking about everything. How her mother had stayed up half the night asking questions about Kyle, about the neighbor with a cat that meowed in different tones depending on its mood, about a dream she had where she could finally see colors. Alexander drove in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. He just observed the way she gestured while talking, how she turned her face toward the window when the breeze came in, how she laughed at her own jokes. And for the first time in years, Alexander caught himself smiling for no reason. When they arrived at the park, he bought 2 cotton candies. "Strawberry!" Lila exclaimed as soon as she caught the scent. "How did you guess?" "Lucky guess," he lied, remembering how she'd loved it at the cafe. They walked along the main trail until Lila suddenly stopped. "Wait, quiet." "What?" "Shh," she said. "New game. We have to guess the sounds. Whoever gets the most right wins." "Wins what?" "Personal satisfaction and eternal bragging rights." She tilted her head. "Okay, first sound. What is it?" Alexander listened. "A dog barking? Too easy." "Which dog?" "What do you mean, which dog? Big or small, Kyle? Details matter." Alexander listened more carefully. "Medium?" "Wrong." Lila said triumphantly. "It's a golden retriever. I know that bark. They have a specific tone. Very cheerful." And so began the most absurd and delightful game Alexander had ever played. He watched, fascinated, as Lila tilted her head toward each sound, her face lighting up every time she got it right. She identified a northern cardinal by its song, a 4-year-old child by their cry, and even the approximate model of a passing car. "How do you do that?" he asked, genuinely amazed. "When you can't see," Lila explained, "you learn to really listen. The whole world becomes more detailed, kind of like a boring superpower." Alexander laughed, and Lila smiled when she heard it. "You have a nice laugh. You should do it more often." They sat on a bench under a big oak tree, and Alexander realized he was completely fascinated by the way she experienced the world. Not by what she lacked, but by what she'd learned to see differently. "Can I ask you something?" Lila said suddenly. "Sure." "Why are you so serious all the time?" The question caught him off guard. I've just always been that way." "But why? Who taught you that you're not allowed to be happy?" No one had ever asked him that. "My father," he admitted. "He used to say seriousness was a sign of maturity, that successful people don't go around laughing for no reason." Lila made a face. "Your father's wrong. People who are too serious forget how to live." Then, without warning, she lifted her hand toward his face. "May I?" she asked. He froze. "Yes?" Her fingers touched his forehead, tracing the lines of worry. "You have a beautiful expression," she murmured, "even when you make that worried face." Alexander's heart sped up. "Lee, I need to tell you something." "Again?" she teased. "You always try to tell me something and never finish." "This time I'll finish." "Okay, I'm listening." Alexander took a deep breath. I'm not the person you think I am." Lila tilted her head. "What do you mean?" Then his phone rang. "Camille." 15 missed calls. His blood ran cold. "Aren't you going to answer?" Lila asked. "It sounds urgent." "It's not important." Lila was quiet for a moment. "Kyle, do you have a girlfriend?" The question hit him like a punch. Because if you do, I need to know. Right now." Alexander looked at her and almost told her everything. But then Lila smiled. "Relax. I'm kidding. You wouldn't be here with me if you did." And Alexander realized he was building something impossible to keep. They drove back home, but what he didn't know was that the next day, everything could change. It was 12:15 on a Tuesday, and he was sitting at Le Bernardin, one of the most expensive restaurants in Manhattan, next to Camille Hart, who wouldn't stop talking about wedding plans. "And I was thinking Santorini for the honeymoon. Or maybe the Maldives. Margot went to the Maldives and said it was divine. What do you think, Alexander?" "Are you listening to me?" "Yes." "Then what did I just say?" Alexander looked at her, and for the first time he realized how perfect Camille was. Perfectly brushed blonde hair, makeup applied with professional precision, a designer dress that probably cost more than some people earned in a month. Perfect, cold, calculated, like an expensive jewel in a display case. "You said something about the honeymoon," he replied. Camille narrowed her eyes. "You've been distant, more than usual." "I'm just tired." "You're always tired." She took a sip of white wine. "Sometimes I wonder if you really want to marry me." The brutal truth was that he didn't. But what he said was, "Camille, not this again." "Not what? Talking about our relationship? About how you disappear in the middle of the night without explanation? About how you barely touch me anymore? I have a lot going on at work." "You always have a lot going on at work, but that's never stopped you before." Before Alexander could respond, his phone vibrated. "Lila, incoming call." His heart jumped. "I need to take this." "Alexander, we're in the middle of a conversa. It's urgent." He got up before she could protest and walked quickly out of the restaurant, answering as soon as he reached the sidewalk. "Lee?" Are you okay? Kyle? Her voice was trembling, frightened. My mom. She fainted. The ambulance is coming. I'm trying to help, but I can't see. I don't know if she's breathing right. Her voice faltered. Lee? Are you okay? I'm dizzy. I think it's just nerves, but Kyle, I think I'm going to. And then the line went silent, except for the sound of something falling. Lila! Alexander shouted into the phone. Silence. He didn't think. He just ran. Alexander arrived at Brooklyn Methodist Hospital 20 minutes later after calling emergency services and begging them to confirm Lila's address. He found a nurse at the reception desk. Lila Evans. She was brought in with her mother. Where are they? The nurse checked the computer. Rooms 304 and 306, same hallway. Alexander ran. When he got there, Dorothy was on a stretcher being pushed into a room, and Lila was on another one beside her, pale but conscious. Lee, he rushed to her side. Kyle? She reached out her hand and he grabbed it immediately. I'm sorry, I fainted. Ridiculous, right? You don't have to apologize. My mom, she's being treated, you will be too. Just stay calm. A doctor approached. Sir, are you family? Alexander hesitated. I'm her boyfriend. Good, we'll need to run some tests on her as well. It looks like anxiety combined with low blood pressure, but we want to be sure. Lila was taken to a room and Alexander stayed by her side the entire time. You left work again because of me, Lila murmured. You're more important. Kyle, you can't keep doing that. You'll lose your job. If only she knew he was the job. I'll manage. 2 hours later, both women were stable. Dorothy had suffered a severe hypoglycemic episode due to uncontrolled diabetes. Lila had fainted from stress and low blood pressure. Alexander was standing in the hallway when Lila's doctor approached, accompanied by another man in a lab coat. Mr. Mitchell? Alexander turned. That's me. This is Dr. Richard Carson, ophthalmologist from Mount Sinai. He was consulting on a few cases here and, well, while reviewing Lila's exams, he noticed something important. Dr. Carson adjusted his glasses. Miss Evans has progressive retinal degeneration in her medical records, correct? Yes. There is a treatment, Dr. Carson said calmly. Experimental, but showing very promising results. A specialized clinic in Boston is performing gene therapy combined with retinal implants. In cases like hers, it could restore partial vision. Alexander's heart stopped. She could see? Possibly. It wouldn't be perfect vision, but light, shapes, colors, faces, enough to completely change her life, to give her real independence. Why has she never done the treatment? Dr. Carson and the other doctor exchanged looks. Because it costs $350,000, and no insurance covers it. Absolute silence. $350,000. For Alexander Hayes, billionaire CEO, that was the equivalent of a week's profit. For Lila Evans, who lived in a small apartment in Brooklyn and took care of her sick mother, it was absolutely impossible. I want to pay for it, Alexander said without hesitation. Both doctors blinked. Sir? I want to pay for her treatment, all of it, but she can't know it was me. Mr. Mitchell, that's extremely generous, but it's $350,000. I know how much it costs, Alexander interrupted. And I want to pay for it. Anonymously, make it look like a research donation or something. Just make it seem like she was chosen for a program. Dr. Carson studied him for a long moment. You really love this girl, don't you? Alexander looked toward the hospital room where Lila was resting. More than I ever thought possible. All right, Dr. Carson said. I'll start the process. It'll take a few weeks to coordinate everything with the clinic in Boston. As long as it takes. Alexander went back to the room. Lila was lying on the bed, eyes closed, breathing calmly. He sat beside her and held her hand. For the first time since the lie began, he felt like he was doing something truly good, something that mattered, even if she never knew the truth about who had really paid for it. Even if it made everything even more impossible to sustain. Because he wasn't Kyle Mitchell. He was Alexander Hayes. And he was completely, hopelessly in love with a girl who didn't even know who he really was. 3 weeks after the hospital, Alexander was in his office reviewing quarterly reports when his personal phone buzzed. It was Lila. He answered immediately. Lay, are you okay? On the other end, all he heard was crying. His heart raced. Lay, what happened? Your mother. She was selected, Dorothy's voice shouted in the background, also crying. Selected? Alexander pretended to be confused, though his own heart was pounding. I can't believe it, Lila sobbed between words. Kyle, they called, from the program in Boston. I got accepted into the experimental treatment. Everything's paid for. Everything. They said it's a research grant for cases like mine and… She stopped, unable to keep talking. Breathe, Lee, Alexander said softly, closing his eyes. Just breathe. I'm going to see, Kyle, she whispered, her voice so full of hope it hurt. I'm going to see. Maybe not perfectly, but light, colors, faces. I'm going to see. That's incredible, he said, and it truly was. It was the most incredible thing he had ever done in his life. Can you come here? I need to hug you. I need you here. I'm already on my way. 20 minutes later, Alexander was at the door of the Brooklyn apartment. Lila opened it before he could knock. She must have been waiting nearby. Then she threw herself into his arms, still crying. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I can't believe it, she repeated like a mantra. Alexander held her tightly, feeling the weight of what he had done and what he had lied about press against his chest like a vice. I'm so happy for you, he said, and it was true. Dorothy appeared in the doorway, her eyes red but smiling. Kyle, they called from Mount Sinai saying a research program in Boston was looking for candidates exactly like Lila. They said she was recommended by Dr. Carson. It's like a miracle. It wasn't a miracle. It was money. $350,000. When does she start? Alexander asked. In 6 weeks, Lila answered, stepping back but still holding his hands. They said they'll do a series of tests first, then 3 surgeries in a row, and then recovery therapy. It'll take months, but in the end, I'll see. She was smiling and crying at the same time. Let's celebrate, Alexander said suddenly. Let's go to the cafe, Arabella, the one we went to the first time. Now? Now. Lila looked at her mother, who nodded. Go, sweetheart, you deserve to celebrate. 15 minutes later, they were sitting at the same table by the window at Cafe Arabella. Lila couldn't stop talking. I'll be able to see colors. Do you know what that means? I've never seen real colors. I only know what people tell me. Red is warm, blue is cool, green is calm. But I've never felt a color, you know? And now I will. And I'll see my mom. She always describes her face to me, but I've never really seen it, and I'll see. She paused and a shy smile appeared. I'll see you. Alexander's heart froze. You want to see me? Of course I do. Lila laughed, and it was such a light, joyful sound that he almost forgot the lie. I already know how you look from touch, but I want to see you. I want to see if my imagination's right. I imagine you with dark hair, serious eyes, that straight nose I'm always talking about. Am I right? Alexander swallowed hard. She was right about the hair and the nose. But she was imagining Kyle Mitchell, the graphic designer from Williamsburg. Not Alexander Hayes, billionaire CEO from Manhattan. You'll have to wait and see, he said, trying to keep his tone light. Oh, that's not fair, she protested, laughing. Give me a hint. No. A tiny little hint? Lee, please? She made a puppy face, which obviously didn't work because she couldn't see, but somehow it was still effective. Alexander sighed. My hair's dark. You got that right. Ha, I knew it, she clapped her hands. And your eyes? What color? You'll have to find out on your own. Lila pouted, but she was smiling too much to really complain. The waiter brought 2 coffees and 2 slices of chocolate cake, compliments of the house, he said, after Alexander discreetly signaled him. I didn't even order cake, Lila said, confused. It's to celebrate, the waiter replied, giving Alexander a wink. Lila picked up her fork and took a bite. This is the best cake I've ever had. Or maybe I'm just so happy everything tastes better. Alexander watched her eat, talk, laugh, dream out loud about all the things she'd see when the treatment was over. And for the first time since the lie began, he realized something terrifying. He wasn't just in love with Lila Evans. He was hopelessly, completely, irreversibly in love with her. With the way she saw the world without seeing it. With the way she laughed at everything. With the way she made him want to be a better person. And when she finally got her sight back, she would look at him and see a liar. Kyle? Lila tilted her head. You got quiet again. Are you okay? I'm fine, he lied. I'm just happy for you. Are you sure? Your breathing changed. It got heavier. She always noticed. Lee, I need to tell you something. Again? She teased. You always say you need to tell me something and never finish. One of these days you'll actually have to spit it out. I know, and I will. I promise. When? Soon. That's very vague, Kyle Mitchell, she said, pointing her fork at him like she was scolding him. Very vague. Before you go to Boston, he said, and it was a promise. I'll tell you everything before you leave. Everything what? Do you have some dark secret? Like, you're a secret agent? Or a vampire? Alexander almost laughed. Nothing like that. All right then, I trust you. And those 4 words, I trust you, felt like a knife to his chest. Because she did trust him, and he was betraying that trust every single day. But he was going to tell her, before Boston, before she could see. He would tell her the truth and pray that the love she felt would be strong enough to survive the lie. Alexander stayed awake all night after dropping Lila off at home. Lying on the penthouse couch, because he couldn't sleep in the same bed as Camille anymore, he stared at the ceiling and repeated the promise over and over in his head. Before Boston. I'll tell you everything before you go. 6 weeks. He had 6 weeks to tell the truth. 6 weeks to destroy everything. At 7 in the morning, he sent a message to Ethan. Need to talk. Urgent. The reply came in seconds. Sullivan's Bar, 8 p.m. And from the tone, bring a good bottle. Alexander arrived at Sullivan's right at 8. It was a quiet bar on the Lower East Side, the kind of place executives went when they didn't want to be recognized. Ethan was already there, sitting in a dark corner with 2 glasses of whiskey on the table. You look like someone who just ran over a dog, Ethan said as Alexander sat down. What happened? Alexander took a long drink of whiskey. Then he told him everything. The fountain at the park, the initial mistake, Lila thinking he was Kyle Mitchell, the dates, the hospital, the treatment he secretly paid for, the kiss, the promise to tell her the truth. When he finished, Ethan was staring at him with a mix of shock and disbelief. There was complete silence for 5 seconds. Then Ethan started laughing. He could barely talk between laughs. You've turned into the main character of a bad soap opera? Seriously? Ethan? No, wait, let me get this straight. Ethan wiped tears from his eyes. You, Alexander Hayes, billionaire CEO, are pretending to be a broke graphic designer named Kyle for a blind girl who mistook you for her online boyfriend? When you say it like that, it sounds worse. Because it is worse. Ethan hit the table, still laughing. Man, this is so ridiculous. Even Hollywood wouldn't buy the script. Alexander took another sip. I know it's crazy. Crazy? Ethan leaned forward. Alex, you're engaged. Remember, Camille, the woman you're supposed to marry in 4 months? I'm not marrying her. Ethan stopped laughing. What? I'm ending it, today. You've officially lost your mind. I've never been more clear in my life, Alexander said, and there was a certainty in his voice that even he hadn't expected. I don't love Camille, I never did. It was always a convenient social arrangement. She wanted the status of being my wife. I wanted, I don't know, stability, appearances. And now I've met someone who makes me laugh, who makes me want to be better, who sees the world in a way I never thought possible. Ethan suddenly grew serious. Alex, she thinks you're someone else. I know. And when she finds out the truth, when she gets her sight back and sees who you really are, I'm going to tell her before that. And if she doesn't forgive you? Alexander stayed quiet for a long moment. Then at least I'll know I finally tried to be honest. Ethan sighed and refilled both glasses. You're in deep trouble, man. But I've never seen you like this, actually alive. So I hope it works out. Thanks. But if it all blows up, Ethan lifted his glass, I get to say, I told you so. They toasted in silence. 2 hours later, Alexander was sitting at Le Bernardin, again, across from Camille Hart. She wore a red Valentino dress and flawless makeup. Perfect. Cold. Artificial. So you finally decided to show up, she said, taking a sip of white wine. 3 weeks avoiding me. 3, Alexander. Camille, we need to talk. Oh, now you want to talk? After humiliating me at lunch with my father? After disappearing in the middle of the night over and over? After, I want to call off the engagement. Silence. Camille blinked. What? I can't marry you. It wouldn't be fair to either of us. Wouldn't be, she repeated, processing. Alexander, we've been together for 3 years. The wedding is in 4 months. The invitations have already been sent. I know, and I'm sorry. You're sorry, her voice rose. The invitations have already been sent. 300 guests. My parents, your partners, the press. Camille, is this about that work emergency? She narrowed her eyes. Those calls you take before running off? Are you seeing someone else? Alexander didn't answer, and the silence was enough. Camille's face turned red. I don't believe this. You're leaving me? You're leaving me? It's not about leaving. It's about what? About you being selfish, about humiliating me in public, about me not being the right person for you. The right person? Camille stood up, her voice loud enough to make people stare. We're perfect for each other. Same social class, same circles, same ambitions. But no love. Camille froze. Love? She laughed, a bitter sound. You think marriage is about love? It's about partnership. It's about building an empire together. It's about appearances. Exactly, Alexander said calmly, and I don't want to live like that anymore. Camille grabbed her wine glass and threw it in his face. The red liquid ran down Alexander's face, staining his white shirt as the entire restaurant fell silent. You'll regret this, Camille said, shaking with anger. You'll lose everything. Respect, reputation, connections, everything. Maybe, Alexander said, wiping his face with the napkin. But I'll get my dignity back. Camille grabbed her expensive purse and stormed out of the restaurant, leaving Alexander sitting alone at the table. People still stared. Alexander didn't care. For the first time in years, he'd done something for himself. Not for the company, not for appearances, for himself. And even with red wine dripping down his $3,000 suit, he felt free. Alexander spent the next morning dealing with the fallout from the breakup. 17 furious messages from Camille. 8 calls from her father. 3 panicked emails from wedding planners. He ignored them all. Instead, at 2 in the afternoon, he texted Lila. Dinner tonight? I want to take you somewhere special. The reply came quickly. Special how? Are you taking me to space? Alexander smiled, the first real smile since red wine had run down his face. Better than space. I'll pick you up at 7. The River Cafe was in Brooklyn, right on the edge of the East River, with a perfect view of Manhattan's glowing skyline. Alexander had reserved the most secluded table, near the window, far from the other guests. When Lila arrived on his arm, wearing a simple blue dress and holding her white cane, he noticed how nervous she was. This place is fancy, she whispered as they were guided to the table. I can tell by the smell, like expensive candles and imported flowers. You've got a sommelier's nose? I've got the nose of a girl who's never been in a place like this before, she corrected, laughing nervously. The waiter seated them, and Alexander ordered wine, real white wine this time, and 2 tasting menus. Kyle, this place must cost a fortune, Lila whispered. You don't have to. I want to. But you work in graphic design. Won't this blow your budget? Alexander hesitated for just a second. I got a bonus recently. Lie number 237. But he was going to tell her the truth soon. He had to. Okay then, Lila smiled. But next time we're going to a pizza place. I feel less guilty eating pizza. The food arrived, elaborate dishes the chef described with poetic detail. Lila laughed at every extravagant description. Wild asparagus foam with port wine reduction? She repeated, incredulous. Is that actual food or modern art? Both. I bet there are 3 bites on the plate. 4, actually. She laughed too loud, and a few people looked over. Alexander didn't care at all. They talked about everything, about Lila's mother, who was getting better, about the treatment in Boston that would start in 5 weeks, about the future she couldn't wait to live. I still can't believe I'm going to see, she said, playing with her food. I mean, I know it won't be perfect. They said it'll be vague, blurry, but it'll be something. It'll be light, colors, faces. She paused, and a shy smile appeared. Your face. Alexander's heart sped up. You really want to see me? Of course I do, she laughed. I've built an entire image of you in my head. I need to know if I'm right. And what if you don't like what you see? Lila tilted her head, thinking, you know what's funny? I already know what you look like. I know you're too serious. I know you worry about everything. I know your breathing changes when you get nervous. I know you laugh when you're not expecting to. She reached her hand across the table. Can I? Alexander placed his hand in hers. Lila traced every line of his palm, every finger, every tiny scar. I already see you, Kyle, in my own way, so it doesn't matter what you look like on the outside, I already know who you are inside. And in that moment, Alexander knew he was completely lost. Lee, yes? I need to tell you something. You always need to tell me something, she teased. One day you'll actually spit it out, right? Today. I'm going to tell you today. Lila turned serious. Okay, I'm listening. Alexander took a deep breath. Now, I'm not the most romantic guy in the world, she interrupted, smiling. I already know that. You're kind of stiff, but I like stiff. No, Lee, Wait, she tilted her head. You're breathing really fast. Are you scared of something? Yes. Of what? Of losing you. Lila went quiet for a moment. Then she stood up, walked around the table with her cane, and stopped beside him. Can I sit here? Alexander pulled out the chair next to him. Lila sat down and turned toward him. Can I touch your face again? He didn't trust his own voice, so he just nodded, then remembered she couldn't see. Yes, he said hoarsely. Her fingers found his face in the dim light, tracing every line, every contour. I want to remember this moment, she whispered. Before Boston, before everything changes, I want to remember exactly how you are right now. Alexander covered her hand with his. Lee, I'm falling in love with you, she said suddenly. I know it's soon, I know it's intense, but I can't stop. You make me feel seen, even without seeing. And then, without thinking, without planning, unable to resist any longer. Alexander kissed her. It was gentle at first, just a soft touch of lips, but then Lila sighed against his mouth and the kiss deepened. Real, perfect, impossible to keep. When they finally pulled apart, Lila was smiling. Wow, Alexander echoed. I didn't know you could kiss like that, she teased, her hand still on his face. You seem so proper. I have my moments. Apparently, she laughed, then turned serious. Kyle, what were you going to tell me? The perfect moment had passed. The truth was right there, waiting, but the words stuck in his throat. He began. You're falling in love with me too? She asked shyly, and Alexander, coward that he was, took the easy way out. Yes, he said, I already have. Lila smiled so brightly it hurt. Then that's all I needed to know. But it wasn't even close, and Alexander knew time was running out. 3 days after the kiss, Alexander and Lila were walking through Brooklyn Bridge Park on a Saturday afternoon. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky with colors Lila couldn't see, but that Alexander described in details she treasured like jewels. Orange, he said, like fire but soft, and pink, pale pink mixed with gold. Sounds beautiful. It is. In a few weeks I'll see for myself, Lila said with a smile. 4 weeks left until Boston. 4 weeks. Alexander's time was running out. Lee, I need to. You know what I hate most in the world? She interrupted suddenly. What? Lies. Alexander stopped walking. Lies? Yeah, Lila continued, not realizing he'd frozen. I had an ex, about 2 years ago. We met in a support group for people with visual impairments. He was blind too, or at least that's what he said. That's what he said? Yeah, turns out he was a volunteer. Could see perfectly what pretended to be blind to, I don't know, make himself feel interesting? Heroic? I never understood. Her voice grew harder. We dated for 6 months. 6 months built on a lie, and when I found out, it was because his sister told me. She felt sorry for me. Lee, and the worst part? Lila stopped and turned toward him. It wasn't even the lie itself, it was the fact that he had months to tell me the truth, so many chances, but he chose to deceive me every single day, like I was too stupid to deserve honesty. Alexander's heart was pounding so fast he was sure she could hear it. I'm so sorry that happened to you. Thanks, but you know, it taught me something. I'd rather have a painful truth than a comfortable lie, always. Always? Always, she confirmed. Because lying isn't just hiding something, it's disrespecting the other person. It's saying, you don't deserve the truth. Alexander felt the ground vanish beneath him. I need to tell you, her phone rang. Sorry, she said, picking it up. It's my mom. She's been paranoid since the hospital. She answered. Hi, Mom. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm with Kyle, at the park. No, I'm not going to fall into the river. Yes, I promise. Okay, love you too. Bye. She hung up and laughed. My mom thinks I'm going to have an accident every 5 minutes. Lee, about what I was saying. A car screeched nearby, honking loudly, almost jumping the curb. They both jumped back. Watch where you're driving. A cyclist shouted at the driver. Alexander's pulse was racing. You okay? I'm fine, Lila said, catching her breath. But that was close. Let's sit over there. Alexander pointed to a bench. They sat, and he took a deep breath. Third attempt. Lee, what I was trying to say is, sirens blared in the distance, at least 3 ambulances racing down the main avenue. The noise was deafening. What a crazy day, Lila shouted over the sound. Alexander waited until the sirens faded. Silence at last. I'm hungry, she said. Can we grab something to eat? Alexander leaned his head back and looked at the sky. The universe was literally conspiring against him. That night, alone in the penthouse, Alexander called Ethan. I can't tell her, he said without even saying hello. Well, good evening to you too, Ethan replied. Ethan, I tried, 3 times. Her phone rings. We almost get run over. Ambulances come out of nowhere. It's like the universe doesn't want me to tell her. Or maybe you're looking for excuses. I'm not looking for excuses. Then tell her tomorrow. No interruptions. Take her somewhere quiet and say it. And what if she hates me? She probably will, Ethan said honestly. But at least you'll be able to sleep at night. Alexander hung up and stared out the window. Tomorrow. He would tell her tomorrow. No excuses. No interruptions. Tomorrow. But tomorrow brought something Alexander never expected. He was at the office when the phone rang. It was Lila. Kyle, can you come over? Her voice sounded strange. Tense, of course. What happened? Just come, please. Alexander grabbed his keys and drove faster than he should have. When he got to the Brooklyn apartment, the door was slightly open. He stepped inside. Lila was sitting on the couch, pale, and next to her was a man in his mid-20s, thin, with a red beard and a completely confused expression. Kyle? The man looked at Alexander, puzzled. Who are you? Alexander asked, but he already knew. He already knew. I'm Kyle, the man said. Kyle Mitchell. Who are you? The world stopped. Lila turned her face toward Alexander. He showed up here, she said, her voice trembling, apologizing for disappearing, saying he found me through social media, and then he started talking about all the conversations we had, about his dog, Bento, his peanut allergy, working from home because he's a freelancer. And I asked him about our meeting at the fountain, she continued, and he said he didn't know what I was talking about, that we'd never met in person. Kyle Mitchell looked between them, completely lost. Wait, you two met? But how? Show him the photo, Lila suddenly shouted, her voice breaking. Show him the photo. Kyle took out his phone and held it up for Alexander, a selfie of himself. Red beard, round glasses, completely different. This is me, Kyle said. Kyle Mitchell, graphic designer, Williamsburg, and I never met Lila in person. On the day at the park, I showed up, saw her, but I froze when I noticed the cane. Kyle said quietly. Lila stood up, trembling. Who are you? She asked in Alexander's direction. Who are you really? Lee, I can explain. Who are you? Alexander took a deep breath. My name is Alexander Hayes. I'm the CEO of a tech company. I was at the park that night by chance. You mistook me for him. He pointed to Kyle. And I didn't have the courage to correct you. You lied, Lila whispered. I was going to tell you. I tried. You lied, she screamed, tears spilling down her face. You let me believe you were someone else. For weeks, you kissed me. You said you were falling in love. I am in love. Alexander took a step forward. Don't come near me. Lila stepped back, stumbling on her cane. Kyle stood up, clearly uncomfortable. I think I should go. Go, Lila shouted. Both of you, get out. Lee, please. Get out of my house. Dorothy appeared at the bedroom door, eyes wide. What's going on here? Mom, Lila cried. He lied to me. He's not who he said he was. Dorothy looked at Alexander with a fury he had never seen before. Leave. Now. Mrs. Evans, I can explain. I said leave. Alexander looked at Lila, at the tears, the shaking, the heartbreak he had caused, and he left. On the street, Kyle Mitchell stood frozen, completely lost. Man, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Alexander didn't answer. He just got in his car and drove away, feeling everything collapse. He had lost her, in the worst possible way. Alexander spent 3 days calling, 17 unanswered calls, 23 ignored messages. 4 times he went to the Brooklyn apartment, and each time Dorothy opened the door just enough to say, "She doesn't want to see you. Go away." On the 4th night, he sat on his penthouse couch, staring at the glowing city below, when the phone rang. Ethan. You still alive? His friend's voice came through. Technically. You talked to her? She won't pick up, won't answer, won't see me. And you're surprised? Alexander closed his eyes. I lost her, Ethan. I lost the only thing that ever really mattered. Silence on the other end. Then Ethan said, Then do something big. What? Something big. Public. Real. You spent months lying in private. Now tell the truth in public. Ethan, that's insane. Is it? Ethan interrupted. You're a billionaire CEO who pretended to be a broke graphic designer to win over a blind girl. Insanity is kind of your thing now, man. Alexander stayed silent. What are you suggesting? A public gesture. Big, impossible to ignore, like those movie scenes everyone calls cheesy but secretly loves. You want me to make a public apology? No, Ethan corrected. I want you to prove you mean it. Be vulnerable. Show her and the world who you really are. And if it doesn't work, then at least you tried. 2 days later, Alexander stood in Washington Square Park at 6 in the morning, supervising the setup of a small stage near the fountain. Ethan showed up with 2 coffees and an amused look. You hired a professional sound crew? He asked, watching the techs adjust microphones. Yes. And lighting? Yes. Man, are you putting on a Taylor Swift concert or an apology? I need her to hear me, Alexander said. For real, in person. Ethan frowned. You really think she'll show up? No, Alexander admitted. That's why you're going to get her. Me? What? You're going to her place at 5:30. You'll convince her mom to bring her here. Don't say why. Just bring her, Ethan. Please. Ethan looked at his friend for a long moment. You're really in love, huh? Completely. All right, Ethan sighed. But if her mom hits me, you're paying my medical bills. At 5:20 in the evening, Ethan stood in front of building number 247 in Brooklyn, taking a deep breath before ringing the bell. Dorothy opened the door with an instantly hostile expression. If you're his friend, you can turn right around and... Wait, Ethan raised his hands. I know you don't want to see Alexander. I get it. He messed up badly. But he's doing something today. Something important, and I think Lila deserves to see it. See it? Dorothy crossed her arms. She doesn't want to see anything that has to do with him. I know, but it's at Washington Square Park, the place where they met, 6 o'clock. He's going to tell the truth, publicly, to everyone. Why should I believe you? Because I'm his friend, Ethan said honestly, and I've spent the last few days watching him fall apart, completely broken. He called her 17 times. He came here 4 times. He's not giving up. Dorothy hesitated. Lila doesn't want to see him. Then she doesn't have to talk to him, Ethan said quickly, but she deserves to hear what he has to say, in person, not through a message, not over the phone, for real. Silence. Mom? Lila's voice came from inside. Who is it? Dorothy looked back, then at Ethan. I'll ask her. If she says no, you leave us alone, for good. Deal. Dorothy went back inside. Ethan heard muffled voices, an argument, then silence. 5 minutes that felt like forever. Then Dorothy returned. We'll go, she said. But if this is some kind of trap, it's not, Ethan promised. I swear. At 5:50, the park was crowded. Curious people stopped when they saw the stage. Some thought it was a concert, others some kind of political event. 3 reporters with cameras took their positions. Alexander stood behind a makeshift curtain, his hands sweating, his heart pounding so fast he thought he might faint. His phone buzzed. We're here. Left side. She doesn't know it's about you. Alexander's heart skipped. She was here. She was here. He took a deep breath, wiped his hands on his suit, and walked onto the stage. The crowd's murmur faded. Cameras turned toward him, and in the middle of the crowd he saw them, Ethan guiding Dorothy and Lila to a spot on the left side. Lila held her mother's arm, her cane in the other hand, a confused look on her face. She didn't know. Not yet. Alexander gripped the microphone with trembling hands. My name is Alexander Hayes, his voice echoed through the park. And he saw, even from a distance, the exact moment Lila recognized his voice. Her entire body went still. Dorothy tightened her grip on her daughter's arm. I'm the CEO of Hayes Technologies. I'm 32 years old, and 6 weeks ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life. Complete silence. I lied to someone who didn't deserve it. I pretended to be someone I wasn't, and I hurt the person I loved most in this world. He paused, feeling the knot in his throat tighten. 6 weeks ago I was in this park, he said, pointing to the fountain behind him. Running away from a corporate dinner. Running away from my own life, and I met a girl named Lila Evans. Some people in the crowd began to take out their phones to record. Lila is blind. She was waiting for someone who never showed up, and she mistook me for that person. She called me Kyle, and I didn't have the courage to correct her. Murmurs spread through the crowd. I let her believe I was Kyle Mitchell, a graphic designer from Williamsburg, because for the first time in my life, someone saw me. Not the CEO, not the billionaire, not the public image, just me. Alexander looked straight toward Lila, even knowing she couldn't see him, and I fell in love, completely, with a woman who made me laugh when I'd forgotten how, who made me want to be better when I didn't even know I needed to be, who sees the world in a way I never thought possible. His voice grew stronger. Lila taught me that there's beauty in the things we can't see, that there's courage in trusting, that there's strength in being vulnerable. She showed me I'd spent 32 years living an empty life, surrounded by people who only wanted my money, my status, my influence. But she only wanted me. He took a shaky breath, fighting back tears. And then I did something she doesn't know. When her mother got sick, I found out there was an experimental treatment in Boston that could restore part of her vision, a treatment that costs $350,000. Gasps echoed through the crowd. So I paid for it. Anonymously, because I wanted her to have the chance to see the world, to see colors, to see faces, to see everything she deserves to see. Tears burned in his eyes, but I was also afraid, because when she could see again, she'd see me for who I really am, and she'd find out I wasn't the man I said I was. A heavy silence fell over the park. I tried to tell her the truth so many times, but I always found an excuse. I always put it off, until it was too late. Alexander quickly wiped his eyes. 3 days ago, the real Kyle showed up at her house, and the truth blew up in the worst possible way. Lila found out that I lied, that I deceived her, that I made her believe in something that wasn't real. His voice cracked. And she has every right to hate me, every right to never want to see me again, because I don't deserve forgiveness. He looked directly toward where Lila stood. But Lila, I know you're here. I know you can hear me, and I need you to know something. He stepped down from the stage and started walking toward her. The crowd parted instinctively. Everything was a lie, he said, stopping just a few feet from her. The name, the job, the life I pretended to have, everything except one thing. His voice grew rough with emotion. The love was real. From the very first moment you touched my face at that fountain, from that silly sound competition in the park, from every conversation, every laugh, every second I spent with you, love was the only truth in the middle of all the lies. Lila was crying silently. You once asked me why I was so serious. The truth is, I had forgotten how to live. I'd forgotten how to smile for real, how to feel for real. Until you. He took another step. You brought me back to life, Lila. You showed me there's more than money and power and appearances. You showed me there's kindness and joy and beauty in simple things. Alexander was trembling now. And I ruined it. I know that. I destroyed the most precious thing I ever had because of my cowardice, because of my fear. He stopped right in front of her. But I needed you to know the full truth. All of it, including the most important part. I love you, Lila Evans. I love you more than I ever thought I could love anyone. I love the way you laugh, the way you see the world without seeing it, the way you made me want to be a better man. Tears ran freely down his face now. And I'll love you even if you never want to see me again. Even if you hate me for the rest of your life. Even if this is the last moment I ever spend near you. Because you changed my life, Lee. You changed who I am, and that's forever. The park fell into absolute silence. Lila stood still, tears streaming down her cheeks. And then, slowly, she began to walk. Dorothy tried to stop her, but she shook her head. She used her cane to find her way through the crowd, which instinctively moved aside. And she stopped in front of him. Alexander, she whispered. Yes. She raised her hand and slapped him across the face. The crowd let out a collective, "Oh!" "That," she said, her voice shaking, "is for lying to me." Alexander didn't move. His cheek burned. "I deserve it." "You do," she agreed. Then she lifted her hands again, this time gently touching his face. "And this," she whispered, "is because even after everything, I still recognize this heart." And she kissed him, right there in the middle of the park, in front of 200 people, in front of the cameras. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. On the 40th floor of Hayes Technologies, the main conference room was packed. 63 employees crowded in front of the big screen TV, watching the live broadcast that had already gone viral online. Billionaire CEO confesses his love publicly to blind woman. The headline flashed at the bottom of the screen. $20 says she throws something at him. Mark from finance whispered. 50 says she forgives him, replied Jennifer from IT. You're both terrible, said Sarah from HR, though she couldn't take her eyes off the screen either. On the broadcast, Alexander stood in the middle of the park, visibly shaking as Lila walked toward him. He's crying, someone murmured. I've never seen the boss cry. I've never seen the boss feel anything, another said. And then it happened. The slap. The entire room gasped. She hit him, Mark shouted. I win. Wait. Jennifer pointed at the screen. Lila was touching Alexander's face, and then she kissed him. The room exploded. Shouts, applause, whistles. Jennifer jumped from her chair. I win. $50, Mark. This is beautiful, Sarah said, wiping away tears. Who knew our robotic CEO was capable of that? He always was, said a calm voice from the door. Everyone turned. It was Margaret, Alexander's executive assistant for 12 years. He just needed someone who could see past the bank account, she said, smiling. And ironically, it was someone who literally can't see. The room fell into respectful silence for a moment. Then Mark broke it. So, anyone want to bet if he's going to marry her? Mark. Across town, in a minimalist, expensive apartment on the Upper East Side, Camille Hart sat on a gray velvet couch watching the same broadcast. Alone, a glass of red wine in her hand. She'd seen the video pop up on YouTube. At first she thought it was clickbait. Then she saw Alexander's face in the thumbnail. And clicked. Now, 20 minutes later, she was watching the man she was supposed to marry publicly declare his love for another woman. And the strangest part? She wasn't angry. Camille took a long sip of wine as she watched Alexander cry, something he had never done in front of her in 3 years together. You never looked at me like that, she murmured to the screen. On the broadcast, Lila was touching his face, and the way Alexander closed his eyes, as if that touch were the most precious thing in the world. Camille felt something crack inside her chest. It wasn't anger, it wasn't jealousy, it was understanding. Because for the first time she realized she and Alexander had never had that. They had never had real love. They'd had convenience, appearances, an elegant social arrangement, but never that. When Lila kissed Alexander and the crowd erupted in applause, Camille turned off the TV. She sat in the silence of her expensive, empty apartment. Then she picked up her phone. Typed a message, hesitated, and sent it. You found what I was never able to give you. Be happy, Alexander. Truly happy. And thank you for setting me free too. See. She set the phone down, took another sip of wine, and for the first time in years Camille Hart smiled, a genuine smile. Because she had been freed too. In the park, the crowd was slowly starting to disperse, though many people stayed behind taking pictures and recording videos. Alexander and Lila sat on a bench near the fountain, the same bench where she had once waited for Kyle that first night. Dorothy stood a few feet away, giving them space but keeping a careful watch. Ethan was celebrating with strangers as if he had just won the lottery. So, Lila said, still holding Alexander's hand. Alexander Hayes. Yes. CEO of a tech company. Yes. Billionaire. Technically, yes. She laughed, though her laughter was still wet with tears. You could have told me. I know. I would have understood. Eventually. I was afraid. Of what? Alexander squeezed her hand. That you'd see me the way everyone else does, as a bank account, as an opportunity, as not me. Lila was quiet for a moment. You're an idiot, you know that? Alexander blinked. What? I'm blind, Alexander. I literally can't see you as a bank account. I could only see you as a person. And that's exactly what I saw. A good person. Complicated. Way too serious. But good. But you lied, she interrupted, her voice more serious now. You let me believe in something that wasn't real. And that hurts more than anything else. I know, and I'm sorry. More than I can ever say. Lila took a deep breath. I spent the last 3 days going back and forth between wanting to kill you and wanting to kiss you again, and that's really confusing. Despite everything, Alexander smiled slightly. I can imagine. And then I came here today not knowing it was you. Ethan just said it was something important, and when I heard your voice on that stage, she paused, wiping her tears. My heart almost stopped, because it was you, the person I met, the person who made me laugh. The person who held my hand like it was the most important thing in the world. It was you. But it also wasn't. It was me, Alexander said urgently. Everything I said, everything I did with you, that was me. The real me. Not the CEO, not the public image, just Alex, the guy who forgot how to live until he met you. Lila turned her face toward him. You paid for my treatment. Yes. $350,000. Yes. Why? Because I wanted you to see the world. Because you deserve to see everything there is to see. Because, his voice broke, because I love you, and when you love someone, you want to give them everything you can. Silence, and then Lila said, I'm still angry at you. I know. I still feel betrayed. I know, and it's going to take a long time before I can trust you again. I know. She squeezed his hand. But I still love you, and I hate that. I hate that even knowing everything, I still love you. Alexander felt tears burn again. Lee? So here's the deal, she said firmly. We start over, from scratch, but this time with one rule. Absolute honesty. No lies, no half-truths, no secrets. If you can't be completely honest with me, then we have nothing. I promise, Alexander said immediately. Total honesty, always. And you introduce me to your real life, not Kyle's life, Alexander's life, the company, your friends, everything. I want to know who you really are. Yes, everything. I'll show you everything. Lila took a deep breath. And if at any point I feel like you're lying to me again, I'll leave, and I won't come back. Got it? Got it. Okay then, she said, and for the first time she truly smiled. Hi, Alexander Hayes. Nice to meet you. For real this time. Alexander laughed, a laugh heavy with tears and relief. Hi, Lila Evans. The pleasure's all mine. They sat there, hands intertwined, as the sun began to set over New York City. Dorothy walked over slowly. Are you two done having this cinematic moment? Because I need to know if I should like this man or still want to hit him. Lila laughed. You can like him. With conditions. With many conditions, Dorothy corrected, but there was a small smile on her lips. Ethan came running, completely out of breath. I won $200 in bets, he shouted. People were betting on whether she'd forgive him or not, and I bet she would. You bet on my love life? Alexander asked, incredulous. And I won. Ethan did a ridiculous little dance. Lila started laughing, then Alexander joined in, and soon Dorothy was laughing too. Even Ethan stopped dancing just to laugh at himself. Right there, by the fountain where everything had started with a lie, it was beginning again with the truth. And for the first time in a very long time, Alexander Hayes felt like he was finally in the right place, with the right people. Being the right man. 3 weeks after the public confession in the park, Alexander stood at the door of a newly rented apartment in Boston, holding 3 suitcases and trying not to look as nervous as he felt. Are you sure this isn't too much? Lila asked, stepping inside with Dorothy's help. It's a 2-bedroom apartment near the clinic, Alexander said. It's not too much. It's logistics. Logistics, Dorothy repeated, looking around. With a view of the Charles River and designer furniture? I took what was available. Alexander, Lila said, turning toward him. You rented a luxury apartment for 6 months just to be near me during treatment. Yes, that's crazy. That's love, he corrected. Dorothy made a sound somewhere between a sigh and a laugh. All right, I'll admit it. That's kind of sweet. Kind of? Lila protested. I'm still evaluating you, Alexander Hayes, Dorothy said, though there was a small smile on her lips. You've got a long road ahead. I know, Alexander said sincerely, and I'll walk every inch of it. The first 2 months in Boston were intense. Lila went through an exhausting series of exams, MRIs, retina mapping, light response tests. Each appointment lasted hours. Each result brought a mix of hope and anxiety. Alexander was there for every single one. At first, the doctors were puzzled. Mr. Hayes, you don't need to attend every appointment, said Dr. Morrison, the head ophthalmologist, one morning. Many of these are just technical procedures. I want to be here, Alexander simply replied. And he was, holding Lila's hand during uncomfortable exams, asking detailed questions about every step of the process, taking notes in a notebook he carried everywhere. You're becoming a mini ophthalmologist, Lila joked after one particularly long appointment. I just want to understand, Alexander said. I want to know exactly what's happening with you. Lila squeezed his hand. Total transparency, right? Always. In the 3rd month, as Lila prepared for her first surgery, Alexander made a decision. He was in the temporary office he'd set up in the apartment when he called Ethan. I want to start an institute, he said without preamble. Well, good morning to you too, Ethan replied. What kind of institute? Research on visual impairment, experimental treatments, scholarships for patients who can't afford them. Everything. Silence on the other end. Alex, are you serious? Completely. I want to invest $50 million to start, and I want to call it the Lila Evans Institute. 50. Ethan took a deep breath. Okay, you've officially gone love crazy. Probably, Alexander admitted. But it makes sense. How many people are in the same situation she was? How many could have their sight restored if they had access to treatment? I have the money. Why not use it for something that actually matters? You've changed, man, Ethan said, pride in his voice. Changed for the better. She changed me. I know, and it's beautiful to see. All right, let's do this. I'll start the paperwork. When Alexander told Lila about the institute, she was lying in a hospital bed, recovering from her second surgery. Her eyes were covered with thick bandages. You did what? She asked, thinking she'd misheard. I started a research institute, Alexander repeated, for visual impairment treatments, and I named it after you. Alexander, before you say anything, he interrupted gently, it's not about you specifically. It's about everyone like you. People who deserve the chance to see, and if I can help make that happen, then I will. Tears began to slip from beneath the bandages. You're impossible, you know that? Impossible how? Impossible not to love, she said, her voice breaking. Even when I want to be mad at you for spending so much money. Alexander held her hand. I finally found something worth doing with all that money. Something that matters. I love you, Lila said suddenly. I love you too. No, I really love you. The real Alexander. The man who sits here with me for hours. The man who writes down everything the doctors say. The man who wants to change the world because his world changed. Lee. And when I can see, she said, squeezing his hand, the first thing I want to see is you. For real. No imagination. Just you. 4 months and 3 surgeries later, the day came. The day to remove the bandages. Dr. Morrison was in the room, accompanied by 2 assistants and a small army of monitoring equipment. Alexander stood beside Lila, holding her hands so tightly his fingers were white. Dorothy was on the other side, wiping tears before anything even happened. All right, Lila, Dr. Morrison said calmly. I'm going to start removing the bandages. Remember, your vision won't be perfect, it'll be blurry, limited, but you'll see light, colors, shapes. I know, Lila said, though her voice trembled. Alexander squeezed her hand. I'm right here. The bandages began to come off. Layer by layer, each second felt like forever. And then the last layer came away. Lila blinked slowly. Then again, Lee? Alexander whispered. Can you see anything? Light, she whispered back. I see light and colors. Blurry, but colors. Tears streamed freely down her face. I can see, she repeated, her voice breaking. I can see. Dorothy let out a loud sob. Dr. Morrison was smiling. Look at me, Lila, he said, shining a small light. Follow the light. Her eyes followed. Excellent, excellent. The treatment worked. Lila slowly turned toward Alexander, and for the first time she saw him. Blurry, imperfect, but real. Dark hair, serious face, brown eyes filled with tears. Hi, she said, smiling and crying at once. Hi, Alexander replied, also crying. Lila raised a trembling hand and touched his face, now able to see what she'd always only felt. You're handsome, she said, too serious, but handsome. Then she laughed. What? Alexander asked. I imagined your nose smaller, she said, laughing and crying, like way smaller. Alexander laughed, that full, genuine laugh only she could draw from him. Sorry to disappoint. You never disappoint, Lila said, pulling him in for a kiss, and it was the most perfect kiss of all, because this time she could see. 6 months later, on a sunny spring Saturday, Washington Square Park was decorated with white flowers and chairs arranged in a semicircle around the fountain. The same fountain where it had all begun. Lila wore a simple, elegant dress, holding a bouquet of daisies, the same flowers she had given Alexander that first night. Her vision was still limited, blurry at the edges, but she could see enough. Enough to see Alexander waiting by the fountain, wearing a dark suit, his eyes fixed on her. Enough to see Dorothy crying in the front row. Enough to see Ethan as best man, making ridiculous faces to make her laugh. The ceremony was small, just 50 people, close friends, colleagues, employees who had watched their entire story unfold. When it was time for the vows, Alexander held her hands and said, Lila, you taught me how to see. And I don't mean literal sight. You taught me to see what truly matters, to see beauty in simple things, to see value in people, not appearances. You taught me how to truly live, and I promise to spend the rest of my life showing you how much you've changed mine." Lila was crying, but smiling. "Alexander," she said, "you taught me that trust is worth it, that true love exists, that second chances are worth giving. And even when you lied, the heart I got to know was real, and that's the heart I choose. Today, tomorrow, always." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the small crowd erupted in applause. And as they kissed, Ethan shouted, "Finally! I've been betting on this for months." Everyone burst into laughter. At the reception, in a small restaurant near the park, Ethan gave his best man speech. "I met Alexander Hayes 10 years ago," he began, "and I can say with complete honesty, he was incredibly boring." Laughter. "Seriously, he didn't smile, he didn't laugh. He worked 20 hours a day. I thought he was a robot programmed to make money." Alexander rolled his eyes, but he was smiling. And then, Ethan continued, he met Lila, and suddenly the robot turned human. He started laughing, doing ridiculous things like recording sound competitions in parks, caring about something other than spreadsheets. Ethan looked directly at Lila. "You saved my best friend, Lila. You brought him back to life, so thank you, and welcome to the madness that is being close to Alexander Hayes." "I always knew you weren't a designer," Dorothy suddenly shouted, clearly on her third glass of wine. The room burst into laughter. "Mom," Lila protested, blushing, "it's true." Dorothy insisted. "Your hands were way too soft. Designers work with their hands." Alexander was laughing so hard he could barely breathe. "I like your mom," he said to Lila. "She's drunk." Still, when the night ended and the guests had gone, Alexander and Lila walked back to the fountain. The same fountain where everything had started 6 months earlier. "We've come a long way," Lila said, looking at the water lit by the city lights. "The longest," Alexander agreed. "Was it worth it?" "Every second." Lila turned to him, able to see his face clearly enough to see his smile. "I love you, Alexander Hayes, my favorite lying CEO." "I love you, Lila Hayes," he replied, "the woman who taught me how to truly see." They kissed there, under the city lights, by the same fountain where a lie had begun, and where true love had finally won. 2 years later, the Lila Evans Institute had treated more than 200 patients with visual impairments. Alexander had become one of the country's leading advocates for accessibility and medical research. Lila had started working as an accessibility consultant for tech companies. Dorothy had finally admitted that Alexander was acceptable. Ethan had become the godfather of the couple's first child, a little girl named Hope. And every spring, on the anniversary of the public confession, Alexander and Lila returned to that fountain to remember where they started and to celebrate how far they'd come together. What did you think of Alexander and Lila's story? Alexander made a huge mistake hiding his true identity, but his love for Lila was real. Would you have forgiven him if you were in her place? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, what score would you give this story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell so you don't miss more heartwarming stories like this one. See you next time.